Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Back for our weekly Zeise is Right video with Paul Zeise of the Post-Gazette. Paul, this is our last non-training camp Steelers show until, non-2024 Steelers show until December, I guess. December, January, whenever they're done. Looking forward to having some new meat to chew on here soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've pretty much exhausted all of the different ways we can talk about the offseason for sure. So it'll be nice when they start actually getting up there and playing a little bit.
We're going to try, though, one more time. Our topic today is what are some Steelers storylines that we've talked about a lot that may not matter very soon, or maybe what's a storyline that maybe is being overlooked that could be really important in the weeks and months to come. I also get Paul's thoughts on Rob King joining as the new lead commentator, Tyler Matakevich joining the linebacking core, maybe a couple other topics there, get into some Pirates, get into some college football, some news from that realm this week, specifically with some programs that Paul cares about. So excited to get into all that. Before we do, just want to thank our sponsor, Pella Windows and Doors. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Paul, I know they're going to get into it on tomorrow's North Shore Drive in a little more depth. It's going to be Brian Bacco, Jason Mackey coming at you on the channel here. But I just want to get your quick thoughts on Rob King taking over for Bill Hillgrove in the booth for the Steelers this season.
Well, I mean, I think that's probably the worst kept secret, around. I thought it was pretty clear even last year that whenever Bill Hillgrove decided to retire, that they'd probably hire Rob King. And then this summer, if you see what they've done, with some of their OTA coverage and some of their other stuff that they've done, they've had Rob King doing a lot of stuff with that Missy Matthews. So to me, it's not a surprise, and it's well earned. I mean, I think he's very, very good. Rob's also one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet in media, which sometimes probably isn't saying all that much. But at the end of the day, he's a really good dude who works hard, who's been very, very competent at what he does. He understands the market very well. I think it's a great hire for them. I was getting nervous when I was starting to read a little bit about how there were some guys from the outside that were actually being considered, because I kind of feel like it's a job that should be just given to, or at least earned here in this case, not given to, but should have went to somebody like Rob, who's been in the market for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think well-deserved, familiar voice. I think that's going to be and it'll be a treat if you live from out of town and you don't watch AT&T Sportsnet a whole lot. You'll get a chance to experience what locals experience, and I think he's got that local voice and very recognizable. So that'll be great. Paul, let's get into the lead topic that I mentioned. We've talked about all of these storylines to death, but what storyline do you think we've talked about relentlessly this summer that won't matter much? Let's say a month from now, but maybe a little bit more distant than that. I'm going to go first. I'll say I think the QB conversation is going to be pretty dead and buried by the end of training camp. There's been a lot of, I think, especially nationally. I think locally we've had a sense that Russell Wilson's ahead, Justin Fields is the backup, and there's not going to be a ton of drama. But nationally, it's something they talk about seemingly all the time. Whether Justin Fields has a chance to compete for the job, whether they're making packages for Justin Fields to be on the field. I think Russell Wilson's going to show them who the big dog is, and I'm not saying that means I think Russell Wilson's going to be like his prime. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, but I think he's going to seize this job to the extent that there's really no question who the starter is, unless things really get hairy around week 5, 6, 7, as we've seen recently with Mitch Trubisky.
Well, you stole my thunder, because I was going to say the exact same thing. I don't think there's going to be any quarterback controversy this year. And I don't think that we're going to see packages for Justin Fields and him playing 8 to 10 plays and all the other nonsense that we've heard. So I'll switch gears. I'm going to go I'm going to go a little bit out on a limb here and say the whole Brandon Aiyuk discussion has been what I would say a very long drawn out discussion about something that's not going to happen. And so, to me, once the season begins, I don't know that we're going to be talking about Brandon Aiyuk, except for he's going to be on a different team. So, we've spent a lot of energy. A lot of people in town have spent a lot of energy. There's been all these scenarios, but I don't see any path where he's going to end up on the Steelers. I just don't. So maybe I'm wrong, but that's the one I'll go with, because the obvious one to me was the quarterback, the quarterback quote unquote competition that never is going to happen.
Yeah, I think. Do you think we're still going to be talking about receivers though? Because I certainly do, and I think you and I talk all the time about the depth of this group, and my concern isn't even so much how it's going to play when you have George Pickens in the number one spot and you have these other guys fighting for number two, number three roles and kind of playing off George Pickens. But what happens if he gets hurt, Paul? Then we're going to look at the whole Brandon Aiyuk conversation and be like, well, now you got Van Jefferson as you're basically your number one. And I think a lot of people are going to be blanket dissatisfied with that. If it's not Brandon Aiyuk, do you think it's still warranted for us to be talking about who is going to fill that role?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's absolutely the case. But I feel like it's going to be someone less than Brandon Aiyuk. The one name that was thrown around is a guy from the Broncos, that Cortland Sutton, who would be probably an easier guy to get. And there's a lot of, reasons why he's your guy. So to me, somebody like that probably, or somebody that gets cut even, right? Someone that gets cut in training camp even. I think that's an important thing as well. So I just feel like it's important to note that the Brandon Aiyuk thing is probably just not going to happen. It's going to cost too much money. It's going to cost too much in draft capital, and I just don't know that the Steelers are going to do that.
Yeah, I think he's the top option available, or at least in theory, and I think that's why so much of this discussion gets steered toward him. But that, like you said, there's Cortland Sutton. I've heard people making noises. I think someone asked Brian Bacco in his chat today about DK Metcalf, who's played with Russell Wilson. Maybe that's a better fit, just on its face because of the existing relationship that's there. It'll be interesting to see how that receiver discussion moves forward. But I agree with you, Paul. I don't think we're going to be talking about Brandon Aiyuk unless Omar Khan pulls something out of his hat. And I don't gather that that's the tone around the Steelers right now, as much as I understand people's desire to have two very good number ones on either side of the field. All right, Paul, I'll let you go first here on the storyline that we haven't maybe paid enough attention to. And I'm talking, I guess, maybe over the next month. Who is someone, who is something that we haven't spent a ton of time on that could really disrupt our view of this team before we get into week one in mid-September?
How about the defensive line? I don't know that we've talked nearly enough about the defensive line. And, if Cam Heyward is less than 100% or less than what he normally has been and less than that guy, I'm not sure that we're looking at the defensive line that really is 100% ready to be a part of an elite defense. I know there's some younger guys they've plugged in there. There's some guys that they've tried to, groom to get ready to even take some of Cam Heyward's load off of him. But the defensive line, to me, looks like there's not a lot of depth and there's still a lot of questions. And that's not necessarily ever a good thing. I mean, we've spent so much time talking about the linebackers and the secondary that I think we've kind of forgotten about the fact that Cam Heyward is coming off a pretty, injury-riddled season, and he's not a spring chicken anymore. And as a result, without him, I'm looking at a group that really isn't all that exciting. So, to me, I think that's a pretty easy, obvious, glaring one in many, many ways, is that, have we really just kind of neglected the defensive line from the standpoint of there's a lot of things that are there that we need to talk about.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have talked about Keeanu Benton, Paul, and how he, is this the year he's going to take a big step as the Robin to Cam Heyward's Batman, or maybe even becomes Batman himself. And there's been obviously a lot of talk about Cam Heyward, but the rest of those guys, you're right. I feel like we, don't talk about them very much. It's a huge year for DeMarvin Leal specifically. I think they used a pretty high draft pick on him, hasn't panned out to this point. was barely on the field toward the end of last season. Isaiahh Loudermilk's another name that they actually traded some draft capital to move up to take. Granted, it was the 5th round. It didn't cost them a whole lot, but they still moved up because they liked him. They liked the fit because he played a similar system at Wisconsin. So I think depth on the defensive line is definitely something I'm watching, even if you, in theory, feel pretty good about those first 2 spots. But, like you said, it could also be when Cam Heyward starts to take, a step toward aging, because he's already so outside the norm, and being productive at the age he's at now. My pick's going to be, I think we're going to be talking about the offensive line as a problem early on. I think the pieces are there for long-term success. I think Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Broderick Jones are going to be here for a long time, play really well, maybe be the foundation of some pretty good teams. But I think the expectation is that they're all going to come in here and gel immediately and be great. And Paul, the statistics, don't really lean that way. It's tough for rookie linemen to kind of find their place in the NFL. I think we saw that with Broderick Jones at times last season. I think we'll see it with Zach Frazier and Troy Fautanu. And I don't think this line is going to be kind of the non-weakness that people think it's going to be over the long run immediately in weeks 1, 2, 3. I think it's going to take some time for that unit to come together. And I think it's something we're going to be talking a lot about in post-game shows.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, obviously, it's not a slam dunk even that Frazier starts at center to start the season. So I could see that. I mean, but you kind of feel like they've at least got pretty high pedigree guys now across the line, and they've got guys that have proven they can play. The offensive line, I think, will be better. I think the other part of it is the offensive scheme will help the line be better because they'll be doing a lot more drive and, run blocking than they will be, taking steps back, which I think if you talk to linemen, it's a lot easier to go forward and push your guy forward than it is to try and step back and let him run into you. So I feel like the run blocking will be better, and I feel like the scheme will be better, and therefore, I think it'll protect the offensive line a little bit. So I don't anticipate it being all that much of a problem, to be honest.
Yeah, I think by the end of the year it'll certainly be solid. But I just think early on, how is it going to come together? It'll be interesting to see. Paul, before we move on to some Pirates and college football topics, wanted to get your thoughts on Tyler Matakevich joining the linebacker core. Do you have any strong feelings about it at all, or is it just a depth move and reshuffling depth options? Maybe Mark Robinson's on the hot seat here.
Where did he go to college at?
With your Temple Owls.
That's right. He's the Temple Owl. So, of course, I have a very strong opinion about it. I'm happy. We don't have many guys in the NFL, right? I mean, the Temple. Clearly, he's not brought in to compete at the linebacker spot. He's brought in for his special teams work. He's that kind of player. I think he's a pretty good special teams player. So I think it's a good move for the Steelers. I don't think it's a high impact move, but I also think that it's not a move that won't have some impact because he is a really good special teams guy. But to your point, it could mean someone has to go, and if that someone could be Mark Robinson. Not because Matakevich is necessarily going to be a guy that's going to get into the rotation, but because you can only carry so many linebackers on your team. And, if you have one guy that's even if he's a special teams guy, kind of, player, you have to account for him on your depth chart. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that sort of shapes up by the time that the season comes around.
Yeah, Mark Robinson's always been one of my, my pet projects. The guys I'm always keeping an eye on that I think a lot of people aren't. I've liked, the pop that he plays with, but I think he's going to have a good camp to stay here and have a career with the Steelers. Paul, we're going to move on and preview the second half for the Pirates. We're also going to talk about some college football realignment news, some Jeff Capel extension news, Penn State whiteout news. Before we do, just want to thank another sponsor, Pitt Johnstown. It's a Pitt quality education with up-close and personal learning, a top-ranked Northeast Public College by U.S. News and World Report. Generous scholarships and financial aid are available, located on 655 picturesque acres with easy access to the city center, including shopping and dining. It's a vibrant campus life with an active D2 athlete community. Check out Pitt Johnstown today. Paul, are you reading anything into the surge that the Pirates found themselves on heading into the All-Star break with the sweep of the White Sox? We talked for how long about how they never were able to go on streaks and just kind of treading water, but finally they get back to 500 right before the break. There are 12 games between now and the deadline. How many do you think they have to win for Ben Cherington to make a significant move to make this team a real contender for a playoff spot?
Significant move, probably 9 or 10. Real move, move to try and get a little bit better, 6 or 7. I think anything less than 6 wins, they probably will, give us the song and dance about how they're not contenders and this isn't the year and all the other stuff. But for them to make a real serious, strong move, they would probably have to go 10-2 and get to a point where they were, a couple of games ahead in the wild card race. I really believe that. I think if they still are kind of floundering around 500 and 2 games out of the wild card or, whatever, I don't know that they're going to make all that significant of a move. I just don't think that they believe that this is their year.
Yeah, I think that's my read too. And maybe they would like to have another year of not giving up assets secretly. If you gave Ben Cherington truth serum, I kind of gather that they'd prefer not to give up much this year, Paul, no matter how much, people want to make the point that you've got Jared Jones, Paul Skeens, Mitch Keller, mostly healthy, mostly throwing well, all at the same time. How many times in my life, I'm 34. I don't remember a rotation like this. And I think taking for granted that it's going to stay that good, in future years is I think it's kind of foolhardy, but that feels like the tone of what they would like to happen, Paul.
Right. I think it's true. I told you. It always feels to me like they're trying to run out the clock, and they're just trying to get to the trade deadline and not have to give up anything at all. I think they would be perfectly happy if they made a trade and they gave up like their 8th and 12th prospect for somebody who's a straight rental kind of player who, may or may not help them. I think there are players out there that probably could help them if they were willing to go get them. I just don't know that they're going to be willing to go get them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'll be the first to do a mea culpa on here, 2 weeks from now and say, hey, they actually did the thing. But, I also don't think you can read too much into one solid week of offense. Like, they were scuffling for a reason. And until you see more, I think they've kind of run out of time to play wait and see with the offense. You can get a guy with years of control in here that helps a little bit, then I think that's the best move you can realistically hope for. Paul, quickly, thoughts on the Jeff Capel extension? I think he's built Pitt to a decent place, but it's still not where it was in the days of Jamie Dixon. They squandered, I think, a lot of talent this past season. Some really solid players. Really, he's hanging his hat on, the one NCAA tournament appearance. I know there's a lot of people who are excited about him, and I know you're probably one of them that thinks, holding him to the Jamie Dixon standard probably isn't fair. But, I also think that he would have liked to have gotten more out of this, Paul, if you're a Pitt fan.
I'm not sure I understand why they gave him an extension when they didn't need to. I mean, he was signed through like 27 anyway. I think the other part of it is, with the transfer portal the way it is, a long-term deal for your head coach is no longer necessary. It used to be, well, you have to have at least 4 or 5 years on your contract because you can't recruit unless recruits know that you're going to be there for 4 or 5 years. Well, you're bringing in guys that are 1 or 2 year guys. Now, that being said, I don't have a problem with them giving him an extension. I think what Pitt needs to figure out is what they are and what they want to be. And, to me, one flip side of the argument is that Jamie Dixon played in a better league, in a tougher league, and had the success he had, versus what Capel's done. I think Pitt needs to be a team that, 4 out of 5 years gets to the NCAA tournament, something like that. I don't think they need to be a Final Four team, but they need to do better than what they've done. That being said, he's done a pretty good job of building a program. He's done a pretty good job of building, a brand back up. He's done a pretty good job of getting Pitt back to the point where they're more than competitive. And so, yes, you hope that by keeping him around for a little bit longer, you're able to, have him really build this program the right way. But again, with the transfer portal the way it is, I'm not sure how much value you have to really give to, having a long-term deal for your coach.
Paul, is your new favorite college sports rivalry, or is Penn State's new biggest rivalry Big Noon Saturday with the way they scheduled the whiteout for the Washington game instead of the Ohio State game? I think it is. I think that is Penn State's biggest rival now, because they always say they're unrivaled, but every year now they're taking these petty steps to avoid having the whiteout against Ohio State or Michigan when those games are getting flexed into the noon slot because, Fox has decided they don't want to compete with the SEC game that's in prime time. And Penn State saying, well, we're not going to give you the visual of the whiteout if you're going to do that to us. It's a nighttime thing. And I think it'd be easy to give in to the TV network, but they're not. And I kind of enjoy the pettiness.
I think the biggest thing is it's a nighttime thing. It is a nighttime thing, but again, Fox is giving the Big Ten a hell of a lot of money. So you would want to make sure that you keep the people that run Fox happy. And I think that, it doesn't necessarily have to be a rivalry game. I think I like the fact that they looked at their schedules and said, hey, this looks like it could be a really good football game. And one that a lot of people will watch because it's obviously, sort of both coasts are covered here. So let's do it. And, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's okay.
Yeah, and Washington's the national runner-up, so it's I don't think they're going to be as good this year as they were last year, obviously, but they still going into the season have that label on them, and they're going to have a lot of eyes on them for that reason. I'm just amused that the Penn State's not giving in when I think a lot of people would maybe prefer it to. I think the solution, Paul, is why can't Fox do 1 week where they compete in prime? Because if you do Penn State, Ohio State in prime time, it does not matter what the SEC throws at them. People are going to watch that game, right?
But again, if you're going to do one game like that, it should be Michigan, Ohio State at this point.
Well, but those people all enjoy playing the game at noon on that last weekend of the season, though, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not like there's a desire to play it in prime time with that, at least. Paul, another college football topic that came up this week. There's some reports out there saying that the SEC and the Big Ten are telling Florida State that they don't want them, more or less. Florida State's been fighting to get out of the ACC to destabilize the league that Pitt plays in. And now you have the two power leagues saying, Florida State, don't do it because you're going to be without a home if you think you're coming into the Big Ten and the SEC. I believe it coming out of the mouth of the SEC, Paul, because they already have access to Florida, through the University of Florida. I don't think that that's a move that the SEC necessarily needs to make, but I also don't believe that the Big Ten doesn't want all those television households in Florida for the Big Ten network.
I've long ago given up, Adam, on trying to guess what's going to happen with all this nonsense. Because how many times have we seen reports where this isn't going to happen, or that's not going to happen, or this is going to happen, or they're not going to expand, or they are going to, and, something completely different happens. So my gut tells me that Florida State should try and do everything in their power to work hard to make the ACC better, because it probably is a better route for them in terms of being safer, especially. But I also am not sure that I really 100% believe that those two conferences would say no to Florida State. So, again, on something like this, if you're asking me, I think Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina should try and make the ACC better and then move on from there, because, this constant every single year there's something going on, and there's, this team's leaving or that team's leaving and all this other stuff. It gets to a point where it's like this has now become silly. It really has.
Yeah, no, I feel you. And last summer we went through the same song and dance how many times Washington and Oregon weren't going to the Big Ten, then they were, then they weren't, then they were again. So many conflicting reports and statements. Now I'll just return to what I said at the top. I think the Big Ten, if they're told they can have Florida State and they can have the Miami and Tampa and Orlando markets added to the Big Ten network and squeeze as much, what's left of the cable bundle out of that state, I think they're going to do it regardless of anything else. You're already at 18. What's the difference between 18 and 20 or 18?
Yeah,
and 20?
really.
it's not that big a difference. So I don't believe it coming out of the Big Ten's mouth. But I also think that they don't want to actively destabilize the ACC. So I think Florida State's going to have to. Florida State might have to risk becoming an independent for a year or two. But I think that they're also open to that. Maybe they can sign a better television deal themselves than they get in the ACC. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I'm going to wrap up the questions here, Paul. Are you interested in this NCAA football video game at all? It's become quite the sensation. I saw an Instagram reel yesterday comparing it to the Eras Tour for men. That's like the Taylor Swift Eras Tour. That's what the women got last summer. Now the men get this video game back this year.
I have zero interest, Adam. I don't even know what it's about. I know I see everyone talking about it. People seem excited about it. I'm an old fogey, Adam. I haven't played video games, and I don't even know when the last time I played video games. So I'm glad people are liking it. The social media posts are amusing, but as far as I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, it's just a football game, Paul. But yeah, I got it myself. I'm enjoying it so far. A lot of people were concerned that it's would be too similar to Madden, or they just make it like, the gameplay would be the same. It'd just be different stadiums and colors and all that. But the gameplay is a lot different. So if you're on the fence about getting it, I recommend. It's been enjoyable so far. It's tough. It's different enough than Madden that my reflexes are going to have to change for me to succeed. So recommend that. Paul, any final thoughts on the week in Pittsburgh sports before we wrap up?
No, I just can't wait till next week when we start talking about training camp.
I know. We fought all the way through, Paul. I'm glad we're going to have some real topics to talk about week in and week out here. Just a reminder, if you're joining here ahead of training camp, Paul and I also host the Steelers post-game shows, especially in the regular season. We might do a preseason game or two as well. So make sure you're subscribed. If you enjoyed the video, please like it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. Other than that, Paul, I'll talk to you next week.
All right. We'll see you, man.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.